Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're not freaking dying from the heat. Because I sorta am. What is happening here? There we go. Hello, 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 beautiful people. We got Beauty, Lily, Sheila, Eisendrag, Samara, Mike, and Galazar here. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, Parzini. No heat here, got AC. I got like a little fan that's just blowing against like my legs down there. It's 18 degrees Celsius in here now with a nice sun. I think inside today it was like 20... I don't know what the temperature here is, but like in the living room it's like 27 degrees inside. So it's been pretty hot. I think it's just because... So here's the thing. I'm in between, like, what's the saying? Like heaven and hellfire or whatever. If I open the windows, I get hit with like hay fever. Like I got pretty bad hay fever. So I don't open the windows, which means that the air inside just gets freaking stale for the entire day. So I'm loving it. So the only respite that I have is basically when I go to sleep, and hopefully I get enough like fresh air for the next day. But yeah, that hasn't happened. But anyway, yeah, so I got hit with like the double whammy, you know? Oh, especially if I go outside now. I literally went to, like, literally across the street. We got like a local supermarket. It came home freaking sobbing my eyes out just because of the hay fever. And yeah, this is when I've sort of prepared myself for it already. And I have medication for it. Doesn't seem to help one bit. So yeah, it's been lovely. Anyway, we're not here to bitch about my hay fever. We're here to give some feedback. And also a tiny update. Who can spot the update? Something has changed. Good morning, Focus and Fractured. Good to see you. Hello, Paolo. Hello, Red Circle. Good to see you both. Hope you're doing well. And then, yeah, we, Is it the mug? No, it's not the mug, but that's a good shout. A wolf? Oh, you mean my teddy bear? My little teddy bear. Oh, the bottle on the shelf? Yeah, I think I moved that around. Okay, like a lot of stuff has changed. But no, that's actually not it. It's yeah, like Lily said, new team challenges on the wall. Let's go. Ah, beautiful. So yeah, we added like a full row of team challenges. So the wall is getting pretty occupied. Let me actually show you. Isn't it beautiful? Sorry, I wasn't showing all of them. Yeah, pretty happy with that. That all got set up. Let me not ruin my camera in the middle of this. Awesome. Oh, my camera's so off built. Okay. What are you doing? What am I doing? Oh my god. I don't consider myself a professional streamer, so it's fine. Blood, sweat, and pixels. Yeah, basically that's also what's on the wall, you know? People's hard-earned frames on the wall, looking really awesome. You hung my team's work below my other team's work? Yeah, that was honestly an accident. I was literally thinking that as well. As I was hanging them up, it's like, oh, coincidence. But they're all on like little like Velcro strips, so I can basically take them off and like rehang them if I wanted to. Not that I'm ever gonna do that, but yeah. Yeah, that is new. No, the mug is old. The green bottle has always been there. I think it was next to my Ubisoft one, but the Ubisoft one is inside the kitchen, I think. But yeah, they're finally on the ball. I'm also, so for people that were anticipating the release of the website this weekend, didn't happen, of course, because as you all know, if you're making something that people are going to be using live, then it needs to work and needs to like be optimized for like a lot of different things. I'm not going to go into the boring details, but basically it's not done yet, but I am really liking the way that we got it set up. I do want to okay, I'll give you this, because I've been lying about the release of this website for like a while now. Let me see. I'm gonna show you a snippet of it. Okay. Let me do that as like a deal. So let me switch on over. Let me make sure that everything is working. So, little snippet here. Got a new banner. We've got like highlighting all the stuff that we do. All that you see is still like work in progress. I still need to do like final polish pass and go through all it properly, but you can see that everything is kind of like nicely laid out. And I'm really trying to highlight like all the beautiful work that like all the teams have been doing. Basically everyone in the community, I want to highlight them as much as possible, right? So we have this like really cool like cutouts that I'm still working on. And then just highlighting like all the different things in the community, which is going to be good. These videos are still placeholder as well, because that's like Academy stuff actually. So yeah, been doing a lot of work. Little snippet here. Just want to give a little tease. And then I'll keep you up to date with more of it soon. But yeah, hopefully we can get it. Out. Do I want to put a date on it? Probably not. I'm working as hard as I can. Let me say that, you know. And I'm hoping that we can release it soon. But yeah. Looks great. Thank you. And there's way more than that as well. So yeah. Because I've done a refresh of like the entire team challenges website as well. So like the web pages for the team challenges. I've done a refresh for the workshops. I've made like a new landing page for like the academy. Like there's so much more that I haven't shown you yet. And then we are gonna work a lot on the back end as well. Eisendrag is asking, to get access to the academy, will it follow with your own subscription tier, or will it be the current highest one? No, it will have its own subscription, because we are adding a lot of content to it. How shall I say it? We've been working on this for a long time. So we find that the value is worth it. And it's also what it's going to do is it's going to build a base for like all the future stuff that we're going to be releasing too. So to give you like a peek behind the scenes, I would say, my contract is ending, and I think I said this before. My contract is ending in like 2 weeks. Then I'm going to be switching over to Beyond in full time, and I'm going to basically dedicate a large percentage of my time on Academy specifically to make it work. To support it, and also to create like additional resources. I have like a bunch of ideas for like additional tracks, not only to help you grow your technical skills, but also to help you build your own portfolio and all that kind of stuff. Conceptual Vision is asking, hey Tim, is the start of the stream always at this hour? Yes, it is. It is. I think if I believe correctly, the announcement on social media is still wrong. I still need to adjust that. That is still on my to-do list, but my to-do list is getting pretty big. So maybe that's why you're confused, which is totally our bad. That seems fair. Excited to sub to it. Yes. yeah, and then yeah, I'm also really excited to like finally release it, start building on top of it. Yeah, and start inviting people into it. There's also going to be like a separate thing where I'm going to be doing group lessons and all that kind of stuff that I've been planning out. More details to come on that yet, but that is for the future. But yeah, we also had a pretty interesting conversation in our community about I think Darius was asking about experience. And this is always an interesting conversation where he was talking about like whenever you apply and they ask for like 3 years of industry experience, does it count if you then have done indie games or team challenges or whatever, right? And then there were like a couple of really interesting follow-up questions there too. Just talking about the broader conversation that even though fake Darius, yeah. Oh my god, he keeps changing his name so many times that I'm like honestly confused by it at this point. But thank you for that, Lily. But yeah, I just wanted to say there to kind of add to the conversation that we had in the community that seniority in the games industry is a weird thing where you could have a person go from like company X to company Y and like basically use that to get a promotion. But sometimes the inverse also happens where if you go from like company X to company Y, that company has like a different benchmark of where your quality or your skill set specifically needs to be, that you might end up almost like lose a promotion because of that reason, which is really weird. But like it comes from an understanding that some studios, for example, some studios require you to do more management related stuff, right? Some studios require you to do like less management. And then if you don't have management experience and this studio is looking for a senior role, but they also require you to do management stuff, then that's where sometimes you have to take a sort of, I call it like quote unquote demotion, right? Because sure, seniority is one thing that we look at when trying to go for like a next studio, right? But it's only like one of the things that we look at, because there's also like income, there's also the project itself, because, and I think this is going to be felt by a lot of artists specifically, right? Let's say you work on there's always going to be a difference in, let's say, releasing a game for, let's say, a generic mobile company than it is to ship a game in like AAA when it comes to, let's say, the next Naughty Dog title, right? They have a different weight and they open more doors for you in the future, right? So I try to take that into account as well. So yeah, seniority is this weird thing, but sometimes for certain companies you might have to sacrifice like getting that seniority bump to get some of the other rewards too. But yeah. And then there was also like another question from Aru as well about like indie games and do they count as experience. That is also a really weird one. And before I dive into this, we are gonna dive into some feedback in just a minute because I don't really have that much time tonight. But if you want to ask any questions, feel free to use this chat to ask any questions and we can dive into it too. So back to what Aru was saying. Yeah, making your own indie game, especially if you then want to apply for a AAA studio, right? It comes down to the same thing that I just said, right? Like you have built up a different skill set in indie than what is required from you in AAA, right? And vice versa as well. So that usually comes with like negotiations when it comes to, let's say, I don't know, let's say you're an intermediate at like a certain company, like a certain indie company, or maybe you ship the game yourself, right? To make it really clear cut. That doesn't really mean that you then, because you ship the game, that you can then become a senior on like a AAA project, right? Because they have different specifications that are required. So just something to keep in mind. because that whole conversation gets really, really specific, and it really depends on like the studios themselves. But yeah, I think it's an interesting topic for people that don't know about it, because I know, for example, and this might sound weird, like you might be just purely from your title speaking, right? You might be a creative director at your own indie company, and then if you were to join like another AAA studio, you might just be a junior. Because just the set of responsibilities is so different, right? Yeah. What's happening with my headphone? Give me a sec. I mean, you can still hear me, but... Why is my music cutting out all the time? But yeah, some interesting conversations happening. But yeah, those conversations, when it comes to, especially when it comes to like the more seniority or pay or all those kind of things, they get like really messy really quick, because it's not only the pay, it's not only the seniority, but it's also the project and the team size and the reputation of the company, and like all that kind of stuff gets thrown into the mix, you know? And also what you bring to the table as well, right? Because let's say if you are really talented at doing multiple things in your indie studio, and then you go to AAA, for you it might actually be very easy to land yourself like a technical role, because you're used to doing multiple things rather than only doing environment art, for example, right? So it's not all downsides. I make it kind of sound like it's all downsides, but there's also upsides to it too. But yeah. Right. Let's dive into some feedback, shall we? So people that have been here, members of our community, you know the drill. Raise your hand if you want to go first, and then we can dive into some feedback. Because I don't know who wants to go first this time around. And then for other people that are new, just to quickly introduce what we're doing here. So this is my weekly time where I basically go through everyone's work, or basically the people that have tagged their work up for review, and then we will have a look at who we are, what feedback we can give. No hands. Yeah, that is yeah, that's interesting. Never happened. Normally we'll always have people like on the trigger, like even like pre-firing most of the time. Hello, Jacket Diamond, sorry. Hello, Paulo Seco. Paulo Seco is going first. Awesome. And then Eisendrag is going second to fourth. Okay. Cool. Let's switch it on over then. Let's have a look. Paulo, we're going to start with your work. Where is the Discord here? Let me have a look. But you were just asking for feedback on competition again, I think, right? If I'm not mistaken. So let me have a quick look. I appreciate broad feedback on the environment as a whole, especially anything that feels weak, inconsistent, unclear, and not yet reaching a professional level. I'm trying to push this piece as far as I can, and I love honest critique from more experienced artists. Okay, I'm not sure where you are in the stages, right? So a couple of things that immediately stood out to me, and then we're probably going to focus on some broader points that can still be improved, right? Here's my pen. So a couple of things immediately. Tangents. This is a very common thing. You'll hear this in concept art and 3D, but tangents are basically where you have one area intersecting like very closely to another area. And these areas, they make things look really weird to us. Like, they kind of stand out, and as humans, we don't like when that happens, right? That's why usually when you do like graphic design, you have your margins that you have to take into account, all that kind of stuff. We have the same thing here. So whenever something gets really close to another object, give it some space. allow it some space to breed, and give it like a little bit more space here on both sides. So that is important. I think overall, the way that you're contrasting like a black geometric shape with like white sandstone, like white, not white sandstone, but like, yeah, white orangey sandstone. That is pretty cool because it adds like a lot of contrast to the scene, right? The only thing that I would say is that you have a lot of very light stuff going on. So what I would recommend is try to find a way to introduce like more gray to the piece, I would say, so that we have a transition from maybe the sides, right? So if we can darken the sides maybe with like additional stuff, that would probably be more interesting. And also watch out for distractions, with the sun being like a major distraction here, because it is literally the brightest point on the whole thing, right? And that's why I basically did this like conversion to black and white, because it allows you to see where you are causing distraction in your scene, right? So yeah. So more gray areas. And what I mean by that is just more darker areas, so that not everything is just like black and white, right? So that you have like a little bit more of a gradient in the whole scene. A couple of quick fire things. Number one, background feels empty. Number two, blending on all surfaces. If you're making something that is in an arid environment, which is like in the middle of the sand, make sure that we have like nice transitions with the sand, and that it blends with like all the surfaces and all that kind of stuff. Blending on all surfaces. I was thinking of doing more to the texture like RGB masking. Vertex painting is gonna be good enough for doing blending on all surfaces for something like this, honestly. You can do RGB masking, but I find them more cumbersome to set up than vertex painting, which is literally something, once you got that set up, you can literally just apply it to the materials that you need, and the setup is going to be the same, rather than you having to go back and forth between another program, right? That's why I love vertex painting, because it allows for more immediate impact on the environment. I would do vertex painting first. If you're then like, it needs like a little bit of an extra push, you can then possibly look into RGB masking, but I don't think you're going to need it. Cool. Lighting is a huge one. I think Lily also brought something up. So the sky has the same values as the rest of the environment too. If you squint your eyes on the grayscale, it's hard to see the separation. Yep, exactly. That's also a good point. You will start to see that everything just kind of blends together, especially in the white values, right? So yeah, so that's lighting, and sky would definitely need to be improved. I'll go next in whatever queue there is. Let's go. See, that's who I was missing. I knew that we were missing someone who immediately puts up their hand. Welcome, PowerTales. Good to see you, buddy. Yeah, so lighting and sky improvements. Those are some good points. And then someone else in the chat brought up, who was it? Let's give them proper credit. Mike is saying more color variation in the sand as well. Yes, I think that's a good shout too. Because this is also going to help with just, and I would say maybe more color variation in all of the surfaces, right? But different surfaces are gonna require different ways of doing color variation, For example, what really works well on pillars or architectural stuff is a gradient from the bottom to the top. Because you're insinuating that there's a lot of dirt buildup at the bottom, and then it gets cleaner the way that it goes up to the top, right? But with sand, you kind of want to go for some generic kind of like breakup, right? Look at some beautiful ref images from the Parthenon in Greece. They have a lot of beautiful stuff for it. I went there ages ago now. I've got like a bunch of really, really cool pictures, but it's really clear to see the kind of color breakup that they do. Yeah, so that's what I would say. A couple of quick things here to fire it off. Start there, and honestly, keep looking at references. Keep looking at like how other people approached it, and try to learn from them as well, right? So, yeah. Powertail saying I had a grocery run. Let's go. Yeah, I think that's the majority of the stuff that I wanted to bring up. If you wanted to bring it closer to what environment artists are doing, I would also think about... Here's the thing though, right? Like, this setup is almost like you're doing like an album cover or something like that. That's kind of what it feels like, right? Because it's kind of like this vague nondescript ruin with like this like weird vague geometric shape within it, and I like that from like an artistic perspective, right? But if you want to make a game environment, that's where we need to think about like, okay, why was the shape here? Like, was this literally, has this been here for ages? Has this literally just arrived? What was the impact on this? Like, did people notice? Like, all those kind of things, right? So that would be like this is not for this environment, I would say, because it is difficult to insert this stuff in, but story for the next environment, right? Like, think more. If you want to become like a game artist, you have to think about like what this would look like in a game and how you can get closer to it, right? There might be some interesting influences from Destiny, because they work a lot with like geometric shapes and all that kind of stuff. That could be pretty interesting to look into. Cool. Yeah. I'll keep it to that. Yeah, thank you for sharing your work, Palaseco. I think you're doing great updates. I love to see these like incremental updates coming in. So really cool to see them. I like the addition of like the more geometric shape. I think it's actually really nicely working with like more the rounded arches that you have. So yeah, good stuff. Keep it going. Right, and then next up we had let's see, who do we have? Did it literally just like vanish? No, right? I'm just blind. Yeah. That's it. Okay. And then we've got Powertail. Cool. I think I've not prepared any notes, but I remember that you had a question about basically what makes the difference between a student project, like a student prop asset, and a professionally made asset, right? And then you had this example from like I think this is The Last of Us, where you were just like, yeah, because this looks like pretty simple and mundane for a game asset, right? That is professionally made. Let me see if I got your question correctly, but let's have a discussion about that first. And then we can dive into some other stuff. Let's see. Where's your little thread? There we go. So yeah, decided to move forward with making high quality props as my main focus. One thing I began to struggle with is understanding the differences between a prop that is AAA quality and a prop that is similar to the skill set of a student. So, and then you bring up this like generator, right? Let's talk about this generator specifically. This generator is not made to be an attraction in the game, right? So that means that the amount of time spent on this like light generator is probably going to be very minimal. If you want to get an idea of what professionally made like AAA games do when they focus a lot of their time and attention on their props, you have to pick something that is like relevant to the story, or is like a focal point, or blah blah blah, right? So try to look for something that's like really important to the story, and then see the amount of attention to detail that has been put into those, right? An easy example when it comes to games is always, especially when it comes to The Last of Us, for example, guns, right? Those guns are always going to have like a high amount of detail because you can go into like the workbench, you can inspect them, like you're always carrying one around, like all that kind of stuff. That's where you're going to see like the most amount of detail and attention placed onto those things, right? Whenever you are creating an asset yourself and you want to showcase, because basically what it comes down to, you want to showcase an attention to detail. And that means that you really need to think about like, okay, how does a person interact with this? Has this been bumped against a wall? Has this been deteriorating over time by external effects? Like all those factors, you kind of need to bake that into whatever prop you're making, right? That's why if you look at ArtStation and you just go and look at like prop, you'll probably see like a bunch of like very mundane kind of items, right? Like wrenches and drills and all that kind of stuff, because it is easier to add an attention to detail into something that is really small because it allows you to focus on getting the quality up, right? Think about what we said last week, right? When we were talking about the feedback. That is basically the same thing happening, but on like an individual asset level. So yeah. So what that means on an asset like this is you basically know that, let's say that this we've established that this is, let's call it basic, right? It is made in such a way that it looks good in a game, but it's not trying to steal your attention, or it doesn't try to like grab your importance in any way, shape, or form, right? So that's where you usually have something that looks like a bit more basic, you know? Let's say that this thing is super important to the story, right? What is the extra amount of detail that you're going to put into it to make it look like it's really important to the story, right? And when I say story, I'm talking about what I'm talking about is like, let's imagine a game, right? I'm thinking about like Left 4 Dead or something like that, but in this sense you have to like keep this charge to like keep the lights on, because otherwise you're going to get overwhelmed or something like that, right? So you're going to be interacting with it a lot, you know? That's kind of like what I think about when it comes to the story specifically. And then you need to translate that in attention to detail. Would you say this is kind of a 70-30 rule at a macro level? There's a slight delay on the stream, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm assuming that you're referring to the props, right? The way that I would apply like the 70-30 rule on this is you can have a look at like how the thing is designed, right? That's one way of looking at it. But you can also look at it in a way where if you're gonna do textural detail, you don't want textual detail all over the thing. That's not going to be good. You need to have textual detail around like the interaction points of the object, right? So let's say you're going to be pouring gasoline in here. that's going to have detail. You're going to open and shut this thing, maybe this thing, and then there's going to be some like interaction with these like wrenches and the wheels, right? So we've established that these are going to be like the main interaction points. So that is where you're going to put in most of your textural detail, because you're going to be interacting with the object in those places, right? That means that the rest of it is going to be more simple. So I guess you could apply the 70-30 rule here in a loose way to focus on textures. What is the 70-30 rule? That's a good question. So it's a rule that basically comes from design, where if you... It's a way of saying that like 30% of an object has details, whereas 70% of the object is no details. Because it allows us to focus on the things that are important, right? So let's say you have like, I don't know, anything that's designed, they're gonna keep that into account to allow you to focus on the things that matter on that object, rather than just everything is full of stuff. And it allows you to not be focused on anything, right? So that's where good designing comes from. The 30% allows you to focus on that, because the rest of it, the 70%, is giving you the rest that you deserve, right? So I constantly apply this to texturing, for example, because if you have like a very busy texture all over this thing, it's going to be very demanding. And you're going to look at it and it's going to be like very noisy, very messy, and we can't be looking at it, right? Whereas, for example, you can see that here, right? Like if you look at the pavement, this is like very rough concrete. But you will see that they deliberately picked like a couple of spots, and then the rest of it is just like pretty clean, you know? So the same can be applied to anything, right? Like if you take this walkway, for example, you will see that not everywhere is like broken up, but there's like a couple of spots that are broken up, and the rest of it pretty clean again. And we do this to make sure that if we put details in our environments, that they go to the spots that matter. Right. So that is basically the stuff that in general makes your prop as a professional stand out more compared to a student. Most of it comes down to attention to detail. Really nailing the feel, like the look and feel of an asset by like being very specific and really try to nail all the layers of the texturing, right? If you're doing something like this, I want to see the texture difference between this metal panel and then a metal panel that has like spilled gasoline on top of it, and then maybe there's some like oil residue in here, and those things all coming together and being nicely balanced, that is what separates like a student prop, let's say, from like a professionally made asset, right? That attention to detail is super important, especially when it comes to gameplay relevant or story relevant props. Right, so I hope that helps. And also, the last thing that I'll say, just from like a game creation perspective again, right? We can apply the 70-30 rule on any environment too. Because that is why this generator doesn't look as detailed. Because it doesn't need to be, right? It is part of the area of rest because we don't want the player to focus their attention on it, right? And then if there's like a broken down car with the hood open and there's like sparks coming out of it, that is asking for your attention where this is not. So, I mean, 70-30 comes from like design. This is more like player leading, right? Oftentimes referred to it like that. But there's so many ways to do that. It's by adding textual detail. It's about creating like contrast between dark and light, contrast between colors, contrast in detail. There's so many ways of guiding the player to somewhere. Yeah. I hope that helps. So one last thing that I'll say, Eisendrag, from your last barrier, for example, right? You were running into some issues with the baking. Those are the things that you need to focus on, right? And try to get it as good as possible. I'll try to be a bit more specific, right? So let me grab... Oh, that's not the one. Right, so if we look at your previous example here, there's still a lot to be optimized. That would be the first thing, right? That's an easy one. But I think you were aware of that. However, what is also important when it comes to this, if concrete gets damaged, how does concrete get damaged, right? Because this almost looks like someone shot it with like something hot or something like that, because it kind of has like a melted kind of feel to it, right? Those are the things that I'm talking about. Oh, that's one example of attention to detail, right? If there is a concrete barrier and it gets damaged, it kind of needs to look like concrete that is damaged, right? So certain aspects are working really good. So like this broken off corner, really cool. Think about what you're saying, right? And this, I know that I'm being very picky here, right? But let me pick the non-wireframe version here. What you are saying to me is that this barrier got damaged, right? Makes sense. This section got damaged as well. All makes sense up until this point. So, right, we have like a bunch of damage. I mean, we talked about this one as well. Not really that fitting type of damage, but this I can believe. However, what makes this really weird is that this concrete barrier got partially destroyed, and then you're telling me that like a person from the city came in and painted it again? Because there's red paint on the broken off corner of this concrete barrier. That's pretty weird, isn't it? And that is the sort of stuff where that's the thing that separates it, right? It is really thinking about, okay, this happened, so that this then happens, and then it kind of has a knock-on effect, right? This is oftentimes referred to as cause and effect, and you'll see this anywhere, right? So, for example, there was a community member like a while back that we gave feedback to, and they created like a ceiling that was completely collapsed, right? They had like a hole in the ceiling, but there was no rubble on the ceiling, on the floor, which is weird, right? Because then you're telling me that someone came in and cleaned it up, even though this is like an abandoned apartment. Doesn't make sense, right? Same thing with like, let's say you have like a frame on the wall, right? Imagine that I'm no longer around, this apartment is completely abandoned, one of the frames after like 20 years falls to the floor. You're gonna see a shadow of that frame because the paint that's exposed to the sun is gonna discolor different than the paint that's behind the frame, right? And it's those details, very subtle stuff, that makes your stuff stand out, that makes your prop or environment stand out compared to the rest of it, right? Cool. Didn't think about that? Yeah. And like, here's the thing, right? Like, when it comes to making games, they will hire nerds, right? If you're like, dude, I love medieval stuff, and I talk to you about medieval stuff, you know your shit, then you're in, let's say we're making like a medieval game, right? I know like, oh, okay, this is interesting because this person has done their digging, right? Because it is, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, right? Because it's not. But like you can get to a decent result these days with a decent amount of input, right? But the people that are going to get hired, they put like an extraordinary amount of effort and thought into all their stuff, right? That's where you separate things. Cool. PowerTel. Let's jump to you next. And also, Eisendrag, thank you for sharing your work. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing the next update. Right. Thank you for the feedback, Tim. No worries. Happy to help. My pleasure. Let me switch some stuff over here. Right. PowerTel. Let's have a look. Made some changes to suggest... I just read that completely wrong. Have made some of the changes you suggested along the way, finally getting around to the story and the thematic, and that I think would work best with the scene. Still working on getting that communicated. Nice. My question is, with the direction that is going on in the scene, now does it feel like it's starting to get rooted into something more than just a plain environment? Yeah, I think it does. I think we're getting some like pretty interesting set dressing. You're adding more stuff to it. You know, I like where this is going. Yeah, so good stuff. And where my eye gets drawn, I kind of drew this like little section over here, right? Where it's like, it kind of starts somewhere here in this kind of like region, I would say, right? And then it kind of, by the way that the environment is composed, and you're kind of leading me up the staircase, that's where you're kind of leading me as a secondary focal point, right? So that's the way that I get dragged along this environment. Now, I like what you're doing already. So we're adding like a little bit of story in here, which is looking pretty cool. Kind of like a drinking, I don't know, party. It's not a party, but like a gathering or something like that. You know, like drunken sailors kind of stuff going on, which is pretty cool. We're gonna dive into some random notes here. It seems like the POM that you had or have doesn't really line up with the tiles that you had. It feels like the tiles themselves are like very nicely organic, but then the height texture that you have is just from like very simple tiles, you know? There's like a disconnect between the two. It might also just be like the base color or something like that. It doesn't look correct yet, but yeah. Something weird is going on. And then we have this stuff going on, which is cool. I wonder... So if you're doing this kind of stuff, right? You're adding storytelling to it, which is nice. Love that you're doing it. Think about how you can make that stand out while not sacrificing how you embed it in its environment. So what I mean by that is that it kind of looks like you just have it carved into the wall, which works, but I would take it one step further and actually carve it through the paint, so that you have the plaster, the gray plaster behind it reveal itself. The reason for that is because it makes it more visible from a distance. Because right now the colors kind of blend together, right? So if we pick a lighter color, that's going to make it stand out from a distance. Because even if you look at this distance, somewhat hard to spot already, right? But if you can imagine that someone literally came in here like last week and kind of carved it into the stone or something like that, that could be pretty interesting. Or what is also pretty commonly done is you have like a stone carved tablet or something like that that is built into the wall itself, that has like the sigil of the guild, right? It would be a guild in this case. You'll very commonly see this on entrances of like old medieval towns, actually. So when I was in Croatia, I'll give you an example. What I was fascinated by as I was reading up on this is that when you go into like these mountainous cities, right? You enter a city and the symbol on the gate is a lion that holds like a piece of parchment, I think. I'm not 100% sure about like the actual symbol. That is a symbol of Venice. Which is weird, because you might think like, what the fuck is like the symbol of Venice doing in like mainland like Croatia? That is because back in the day, Venice was actually really powerful. And they were like way more spread out than they were, and they actually owned like a part of those regions, and which is really interesting. So you can still see like the legacy in like just normal streets and the entrances on gates and all that kind of stuff still preserved, which is really cool. Anyway, long tangent, but something like a stone carved tablet that is like built into the wall somehow could be interesting. However, if you just want to do a carving, that is totally fine too. Because sometimes, you know, can't be bothered to make like a whole freaking stone tablet and then like build some stuff around it. That's fine too. And then the other suggestion that I had is maybe we can do like a very subtle light coming from the inside. I know that you're still working on this, and this was like an earlier suggestion that I had, but maybe you just make it like, because it is kind of like a shitty wooden door, right? So if you just scale down like one door and you kind of have like a little sliver of light coming from the bottom of it or something, that can be interesting. Very subtle. You don't have to create new content, and you're trying to insinuate that like the party moved inside or something like that, right? And you could even then also tie in the little thingy that you have here, right? So you could have like some light coming out as well. And this can all be very subtle, right? I was actually thinking about a light source either from that or from the window. Yeah, try it. I would say try it all and see what you like the most, right? Speaking my mind, let's go. Great minds think alike. Cool. And then I see that you're doing more set dressing as well. That's awesome. Like I said, great start. Be careful for repetition though. Again, I know you're still working on it, but watch out for repetition, right? This stuff becomes like boring like really quickly. Again, what you can do, even if it's like a unique asset, right? You can still see a case where you just cut out like one of the planks, or maybe two of the planks, and then you just map like the side of this in a different way, and you have like somewhat of a new bucket, and then maybe you, I don't know, you make it even more wonky on the other side, you beat it up with like a soft brush or something, and then you have like a broken bucket, you know? But again, this stuff is like easy to fix, even with like a new material instance. You vary up like the shapes, not the shapes, the textures a little bit. That can help a lot too. Cool. Thank you, Powerto. I appreciate you sharing your work, and I would say a best of luck. For people that are popping in, welcome. If you have any questions during the stream, feel free to ask me. Anything about game dev, environment art, I don't know, about me? Feel free to speak your mind, ask your questions, because we're here to help. Thank you very much, Tim. Let's keep it pushing. Let's go. Do it. Good luck, everyone, with your feedback. Some lovely scenes in here. Yes. Community is cooking up. What is a skincare routine? Oh my god, I wish I had one. I was thinking about maybe starting one, but I have no skincare routine. The closest that I'm getting to it is like shaving my head like twice a week, and that's it. Pretty much it. Gotta cook some stir fry? Let's go. Enjoy the stir fry, buddy. Let's see. I don't think we have like any further hands, so it's like a wild card season. If you are in the stream and you put your work up for feedback, feel free to raise your hand and we will prioritize you. Otherwise, we're just going random. Right, let's pick off like a couple of quick ones that I've already had a look at before. So, first one is from Byron. Byron is working on a new scene. Reclaimed by the forest, bioluminescent mushrooms, magical flowers, moss, ivy, glorious oak, all that kind of stuff. Really, really cool. I like the concept as well. The initial thing that I thought when I saw this concept is noise. There's a lot of noise that is going on, right? Because you can tell by this image that a lot of it is just demanding your attention. And that is because there's a lot of textural detail going on in all the surfaces. And this is one of those cases where, you know, the 70-30 rule that we spoke about before, where you dial back how demanding certain elements are in the scene, is going to allow you to then focus more on the main showpiece, right? Like the oak that's growing outside of like an oak barrel. There's some cool things going on there. But yeah. So basically what it comes down to is, let's make it something like this, right? This is where you want to center your detail. And then anything outside of this region is where you want to think about reducing detail wherever you can and cluster detail in certain areas. Because we don't need to remove all the detail, right? But let's say if we keep this, like this element of detail, which is really cool, but then we maybe look at like the floor and we simplify it just a bit so that it doesn't become like as demanding as the rest of it, right? Because then what we're basically doing is I'm looking at certain areas and I'm, as an artist, deciding, hey, this is an interesting place where you can look, and this is a place where you don't even have to bother looking, right? And that's the way that we get to guide players through our environment, by being very specific with where we add certain elements, right? But yeah, the other thing that I would say, be very careful with the amount of different skills that are required to make this exact environment. You're talking about making a hero tree, which already takes a lot of skill, right? To make it look really good. You're talking about like a lot of modularity, a lot of tileable textures, a lot of unique foliage, being really good at lighting, like all those different elements, they come together. So there's like a lot of skills that you're gonna have to combine. So just a word of caution that this is ambitious, right? In terms of like the amount of skills that are needed to pull this off. So that basically means either you have a lot of time to invest into this, or it is you need to decide like either maybe you reduce some of the elements that are most concerning to you, right? Or you pick a different concept, right? So it's a couple of options there for you to think about. But yeah, nice block out so far. So keep it going, Byron. Let's see, question in the chat. Parzani is saying, Tim, is it important to have great materials as an environment artist? It depends on what kind of artist you are, right? What I would say is, for example, if you're in my position, you need to be good at materials because you focus more on making bigger environments, right? If you focus on like individual assets, then it is going to be more about like how you do unique textures, right? So it kind of depends on what the goal is for what you want to achieve. But in general, it doesn't hurt to have like a good base of materials. And then if you focus on building props, for example, then you need to be really good at textures, right? Because that's one of the core elements there. But for an environment artist, if you're focusing on bigger stuff, it's more about, I think you can get away with being less good at materials, but being way smarter with them, because it's more about the workflow, the reuse, and like how you set them up and all that kind of stuff. Focus Fractured is asking that's Byron, I'm assuming, what should be reduced? That is up to you. I would honestly say that if you look at the concept that we were just looking at, if you want to reduce something here, pick the thing that scares you the most, which is probably going to be foliage. If you've never done foliage before, this is not a scene that I would recommend for foliage. And then make it more about like making really, really convincing wood. Right? Because that still allows the scene to remain mostly intact. And then you can do something way cooler with like the roof, right? By working with like really, really clever like wood modular kit that you've made. Hello, Hazino. Hello, hello. Good to see you, buddy. We'll dive into your feedback in just a minute. Actually, we might jump into that immediately. Let's have a look. So let's have a look. I kind of want to do the retopology a little bit to see what I'm getting myself into later down the line after my holiday. Okay. Is it normal for the mesh normal to be acting like this for the hair? Oh, you're talking about like this stuff, right? Well, that just comes down with like how you assign your mesh normals, right? That's honestly what it comes down to. Because for certain elements, for example, when you see this pinching, that is a hard edge where you probably don't want to have a hard edge, right? Because think about when you're doing baking, right? So some baking quick tip. If you're doing any baking, anything that is close to 90 degrees needs to be a hard seam or a hard edge and a separate UV island as well. That's a general rule. So that means that whenever you have an object like this, which is probably going to have like the same UV islands as well, that means that you're going to run into some baking issues because you assigned the wrong mesh normal for what you're doing here, right? To keep things simple. And also, if this is already retopologized, and this is the level of retopology that you're going to be doing for the entire statue, and I've seen other people say this needs to be way, 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 way lower. Because otherwise, if we're going to go with this density across like the entire statue, because here's the thing, right? Like, let's say, is this an accurate like count already? This can't be 10k, right? Is that already 10k? I mean, it could be if you have the back faces on, right? But let's do a simple exercise, right? If let's say this is the hair, it's about 1k. Okay, let's go with your example, right? Even if it's 1k. 800? Now it's 1k. Do you see what the issue is? If you're going to go with that sort of density on the entire object, you're going to run into a lot of issues. I think for something like that, that is, especially when it's inset into the object, you can easily get away with... God, what would I do with this? Like, make it a plane with like 20 tries or something like that. Because here's the thing, like you can just literally have a plane, because all the information you're just literally going to be baking down onto it, right? So it doesn't need to be a full formed mesh. And even if it needs to be, going down to like 100 triangles is going to give you more than enough for the whole thing. Because the thing that I was illustrating is that if this is your entire object, right, and this is already like 1K, we are running into some issues. All right, let's be a little bit more fair. Right, and this is just a quick comparison, right? But yeah, we need to reduce that further down. Whereas, like, what would I love to see? If you're just showing faceting on the corners, the thing that we're talking about, the hair, you're never gonna see corners because it's gonna be obscured by her head and also like the wing. So even if you have like the hair coming out, right? Like a little bit, even if you were to do something like this, right? So let me see. These are all the vertices that I added, right? Maybe one here, maybe one here. That's fine, because we don't... I mean, there's another one there as well. And then we're probably going to have like some geometry coming in here as well, just like one. We can connect up here. But the thing is, this is not going to be like your main silhouette, right? Because the face is going to be the main silhouette, and then this stuff is going to be the main silhouette, but the hair is going to be less important than anything else. So we got to make it cheap, dude. We got to make it cheap. Because I don't know what the other people said when it came to actual estimations for final poly count, right? But I saw Adam giving you like a good range, I think. I don't remember when or where he said it. Or was I off? I'll need to see some example. I mean, look at it. Yeah. He estimated 5 to 10K per statue. I mean, I think he's even overestimating for that. You can go way lower than that. Because here's the thing, right? Like, one thing that we always need to keep into account is that, well, it depends on the size, right? Like, what is some of the sizes here? We have like a size reference that I can quickly access. Ba-da-bum-bum. Let me scroll all the way up. Let's have a look. Okay, let's say, okay, so it's roughly like this height, right? So rough estimation, if you have like a person next to it, I mean, it's not going to fit. Like, let's say this is like 1.5 meters, right? Let's say that's 1.5 meters, and then spending like 40K on statues alone, plus then the main base. I mean, the main base is going to be like similar. Then we're talking about like, let's say 50K triangles for the whole thing. It's too much. That's too much, in my opinion, for like a static asset that is not going to be that important to the scene, right? I mean, sure, we're elevating it in importance because it's your personal work, right? But, God, yeah. I would be, my personal opinion, can probably go like a little bit higher. That would be something that I would be aiming for. And honestly, the lower you can go, while still making it look kick-ass, the better. But yeah. Have a look. See what you can find. I'm curious to see how low you can push it, dude. Because that is going to be a good test to see. But yeah. Good stuff. When it comes to the mesh normals, this is gonna. You're saying this is gonna be hard as hell. Yeah, but like I think so. This is an interesting exercise where you're going to learn about different ways of optimization, right? Because not everything needs geometry. Sometimes you can, and this happens in a lot of cases these days, is that you can actually get additional detail from, like, let's say the wings are completely flat, you know, as stripped down as they can be, just focusing on the silhouette. And then you get like additional detail by adding parallax occlusion mapping back onto it, right? That would be like a way where you can make a sacrifice for like less geometry here, but then add like a material that's going to compensate for that a little bit. But yeah. Yeah, just go as low as you can. And good luck. Right. So we're going over to Kurt Roman. Welcome back, Kurt. Let's see. You wanted some feedback on the composition, right? I probably won't go too deep into it because we talked about it last week already. And I think from when it comes to my composition advice would be to again go back to the story that we had set up, right? Which is basically like you're going with the story of a child who is unable to climb, then looking at their friends like playing in the treehouse, right? That kind of thing. So I'm looking at composition not only from like where do I place the camera and what lens do I use, but it's like what framing device can I use to then bring out the storyboard, right? So that stuff from last week, that still stands, and you can still do a lot of good stuff with that. I added some additional things where you can add like a path here with like a climbing ladder that takes you up to the treehouse as well. Also, using the rule of thirds. So this is a common thing that I use all the time, very simply. Wherever you see like these intersections of lines, that's where you want to put pieces of your environment, right? So that treehouse is too much to the right. Move it a little bit more to the left, so that it coincides with like this line over here. And what I then, this is a personal thing that I like to do, is I drew the path down here, right? I would then maybe push the tree a little bit more backwards, extend the pathway going from like the left side of the frame all the way to the right, and then link up with the treehouse. Because then you can kind of see what I mean, right? So if we do like a little overpaint here, if I go back and instead of doing this, I do something like this. I mean, this goes all the way to the corner, so I wouldn't do that. But anyway, beside that point, I'm using more of the frame, right? And I'm trying to guide you more from like the left to the right, because it almost feels like if I'm putting in like a lot of leading lines here, I'm disregarding like the rest of the frame here. If that makes sense. I'm kind of throwing it away, like all that free space. If I can make more use of that space that's available, that's going to be to my benefit. Keep those lines. And then the foreground elements, that's what I just mentioned, right? The things that relate to your story, having the window frame in there, physically visible. I think that could be like a good foreground element. It's going to play into the story too, so that could be awesome. Then the other thing that I would say, this scene is just way too big. Like the scale of the scene for what you're trying to do with it, it's almost like they're fighting against each other. Because you can literally, what you can literally do is have like those like American like backyard fences. You know, I don't know, like put a fence in here. Maybe there's like, I don't know, one of those houses like peeking over. But that's all you need. You don't need to have like a massive open world. Like you don't need to have any of that, because you're still trying to tell a very personal story that's about like a kid that's looking at a tree house. She can't play with the other kids. She's sad about that, you know? So if we can make it more condensed, A, it's going to save you a lot of time, and B, it's going to make for a more personal story as well. So I would probably condense it down and try to do I'm probably too stuck in the story world I created beforehand. Well, but the story world that you said was just, it was about this kid, right? This kid that couldn't go play with like their friends because, I don't know, for whatever reason, like she's in a wheelchair or something like that, right? Because it feels like you're creating a world that is completely detached from the story. Right? Because the thing is, I got a layout of the whole town in my head. Yeah, that is going to bite you in the ass, guaranteed. Because the thing is, we don't need to create a whole town to convince the player or the viewer that there is a whole town. Right? Because we can literally have a fence, and the landscape can literally end at the fence, right? To make it really clear. And then you just have like the same building that you're using in the foreground, like multiple times copied to kind of give you like the sense of suburbs, maybe a couple of trees. And that gives you a sense of like a wider world rather than having to make that world, right? And this is actually, we use this a lot in games. Whenever you have an open world map, go to the border. Because a lot of work has gone into making it feel like it's a part of the natural environment, but it is still going to naturally block you somehow, right? The most basic implementation is invisible walls, right? They still get used, but in the best use cases, there's actually a lot of work to kind of make it feel natural, and that the terrain extends beyond the borders, but it actually doesn't, you know? So that's one thing. Kind of go, try to make it feel like that, right? And this is a very good exercise to showcase that you can do this in the production environment as well. Because yeah. Because also the thing... Okay, let me make it more applicable. Basically, what you're trying to do now is you're trying to make Assassin's Creed Valhalla where you should be making Assassin's Creed 1 or 2. And I mean this in a way of, especially open world games, they have this tendency of like being really proud of like the scale and the size of their maps, right? You've heard this a ton of times before, not as common anymore, but they'll still use it sometimes. That is basically what you're trying to do now, right? Because if you then want to make all those streets like viable and playable and interesting and all that kind of stuff, you basically have to do like 10 times the amount of work for almost zero payoff. Because it's just set dressing. It doesn't really add to the main story that you wanted to tell of this kid looking at their friends, right? Plus, also, it's going to take you like a year and a half instead of like a couple of months potentially. The image is from my trilogy that I'm writing, and I finished the first book, so I'll probably need to step away from some of that. I think, okay, so if you're doing this for different purposes rather than just becoming an environment artist, right? If you want to do this for writing purposes, it probably makes way more sense to do it in 2D rather than 3D. It's gonna be way quicker. Like 1,000 times more quicker. That would be my suggestion. I mean, I also don't know what the scale and scope you have is in mind, right? But yeah. It's always... What I try to do is always like, okay, what is the end goal, the purpose here, right? If I need to tie it to, let's say, I don't know, a book cover, then I'm not going to make like a whole 3D scene because that's just a bunch of wasted time, right? Yeah. I'm doing it to get the proper pipeline down. Okay. Well, then the suggestions that we talked about today are going to be very relevant. So yeah. I would say keep it small and focus on the actual execution of those individual elements, right? Focus on making a good tree. Focus on making like modular planks that can be used for the tree house. Like do all those individual bits, and focus on focus on higher quality. I'll stick to what you said. Sounded good to me. Awesome. It's good to hear, Kurt. Best of luck. Best of luck. Hello, the other noob. Let's go with Wednesday. Let's go. Now we're going to go into a difficult one for me. I'll explain why. Because Sadie is working on this work in progress scene. And I'd appreciate any feedback you have on my textures. What are the biggest problems I should tackle first? I've made the grains using a trim sheet and broken things into tiling textures like you suggested. Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, that's cool. Really doing a good job of trying to break it all up into like individual textures and trim sheets and being more performative. That is awesome. The reason why this one is so difficult for me is because it is leaning on you doing a lot of experimentation with an art style that we don't really have like a solid understanding of what we're working towards, if that makes sense. Right, because you're trying to aim to make the jump from like AA to AAA, right? Making quality personal projects that I can hit the quality bar. No, it's that is not an issue with you, right? But I'm trying to figure out like how I can best help you in this situation. And I think what I keep grasping towards is if we wanna see improvements, or if we want to talk about improvements, then we need to make sure that we're aligned on which direction we're pushing in first, right? So that's where I don't know that currently. So that's why I'm saying it's difficult, and it's not an issue of you, right? But maybe what could be helpful, Sadie, for you next time is if you share like, hey, these are my inspirations. This is the sort of goal that I want to push towards. I was thinking towards maybe those Spectre screenshots. Spectre screenshots. If you want to update your thread, if you want to drop me a couple of messages. Oh no, you literally have the concept here. What am I saying? You're talking about this one, right? Like the concept here. Just making sure to confirm that. Sorry, I'm sending you all over the place, Sadie. Because yeah, here's the weird thing, right? Like if you want to go from like AA to AAA, Then, oh, I don't think the links I'm sending are working. Oh, hold on, Sadie. Give me a sec. Let me just give you the powers to send links that we can have a look. There we go. Please try that again. Then we can check stuff out. Because what I'm thinking when it comes to AAA, it is very difficult to find. I mean, you have like Riot with like Arcane, right? Not Arcane with like League of Legends, right? I guess they're on like AAA. But I'm trying to think about like other examples, and that's probably why I was grasping towards like I want to see more PBR, so that you can kind of bring stylized and AAA rendering together, right? Spectre Divide. Okay, let's have a look at this real quick. All right. Yeah, so this is the sort of style that I was talking about, right? As in, this is using PBR, and you can kind of see that it's using like roughness information, and it's doing interesting stuff when it comes to the texturing. Kind of the same thing as like Valorant, right? They kind of have like the same, very similar style going on, which is cool. In that case, what I would say, let's have a look then, right? So let me grab like an image here. Let me add this in here. Thank you, Mark, for the image. I appreciate it. Cool. So what we can already tell is that what they are doing is they still have like more textual detail and more like decals and all that kind of stuff on their assets, right? So for example, when it comes to the cabin, you would probably want to see like more wiring and more cabling going on, so that we get, because the reason why I'm grasping to that immediately is because I get the feeling that a lot of the shapes are now coming from like the bigger shapes, but we're missing a lot of like medium to very small shapes, especially small shapes, right? So I'm looking for opportunities that we can add like additional detail into certain elements. Which, that's why I'm grasping towards like these like little detailed little sections, you know? That could help out. Let's see. Because it's basically, if I were to simplify this, right? We're taking something that is very realistic at first. So that starts with like finding references for like the realistic thing, like cranes, like in docks and all that kind of stuff. And then we're basically trying to boil it down to its essence and keep the most interesting elements, and then place those in our environments, right? That is basically what we're doing if I'm boiling it down from like a very high level. Is boiling it down to its essence. And I think you have the big shapes you already have. Big shapes, I think. Medium, it seems like you're working on the medium shapes, because we have like a lot of interesting stuff happening here especially, which is looking pretty cool. But then we need to focus a lot more on the smaller shapes, I would say. So medium is kind of like partially work in progress, and then small ones, we need to have more of those. So yeah. Maybe adding cables, you have like usually like these like crane cabins that are just like all that stuff. Let's see if we can find some excuses here in the foreground too. Because here's the thing, like we can't really do that much with the foreground, I would say. Because the foreground is like quite limited, right? Yeah. What you can do with the foreground is think about how you can create like little elements here, especially this area. You can do something with decals. So what I'm thinking is that someone comes out here and smokes, so you can have some like cigarette ashes. Maybe there's like a cigarette on the floor, something like that. Then maybe also there's like someone spilled some stuff and there's like, I don't know, like a wet stain or something like that here, right? So what I'm trying to do with that is two things. I'm trying to increase like the small details, like I was just saying, right? And I'm also trying to introduce more roughness variation by adding in like the little wet, like puddle. It can be oil, it can be wet, it can be whatever, right? Because with all this machinery, I can almost imagine that there's like some oil just leaking down, and that this is like an oil puddle. Could be interesting. And then once you have that puddle, we can kind of, I don't know, some more stuff here if you wanted to. So we're basically trying to do this sort of stuff that they do in certain areas, right? Where you have like these little micro compositions happening. Small. And then you can do that in the background as well, where maybe you have more containers, more branding on different bits of containers. Maybe there's like a section where I think yeah. Yeah. Does that make sense? Spinning my wheels a little bit here, I'm not gonna lie, but I think we're going into the right direction. So because what I can see is that there is big texture variation, but then they actually have a lot of medium to small texture variation with decals and vertex paint and all that kind of stuff, which you can definitely do more of, you know? Like rust, like the brown rustedness that you see could be pretty cool to incorporate in like certain areas. This is more helpful than I can even explain. Well, I'm happy one of us thinks that way, Sadie, so I'm happy. Cool, yeah, but I think if I were to boil down the style, because that's what we're really trying to do here, right, is a lot of it is actually coming from texture information, right? Even if the shapes are like very, very simple, because you're working with like relatively big, clean shapes, a lot of it is going to come from, you know, those like little elements of like rusted decals, like the buildup at the bottom with the dirt and the rust and all that kind of stuff. And very subtle, like grainy detail to enhance like the realism. Because I think what I always find interesting is that if you have like a very stylized game where they're like very considerate about the amount of like noise that they add to different surfaces, it's always interesting to see kind of gravel or something like that, because it is noisy by design, but I think it does a good job at like elevating the realism of a scene. So yeah. Cool. Thank you, Sadie. We got through it. Happy about that. And yeah, like I said, like I keep saying before, like it's a really interesting scene, right? It's almost like you're taking something that is like, well, like you actually took it in the opposite direction, right? Which I mean that you took something that was very stylized and then tried to infuse it with something that feels more realistic, right? Where I feel like looking back at it now, it might actually be easier if you do it the opposite way. So like you can still use the concept, go look at the real stuff, see what the real stuff looks like, try to recreate it as much as possible, and then see in what way you can push it to like be stylized like this one. Because in terms of shapes and geometry, this still feels like semi-realistic, right? But then the texture feels very deliberate and more stylized, I would say. Cool. Enough rambling. Thank you, Sadie. Thank you for sharing your work. Always really nice to see you do updates on this. And I had a look at your portfolio too. So yeah, really awesome stuff that you have on your portfolio already. So I can't wait to see what you're going to do with this. See you next week. See you next week, Sadie. Thank you. Man, I am boiling in here. Let me rotate my fan. Hey, you buddy. Okay, that's gonna be helpful. Beauty is saying stylized seems a lot more harder than realistic. Yes, yeah, it is. Because with realistic, there is always a thing that you can rely on, right? Like with realism, you kind of always have like a grip of like, oh, this is what we're gonna do, right? You can look at a reference image and then you're pushing to get closer towards that reference image in some way, right? But with stylized, you're actually stripping away layers to specifically reach like an outcome that, you know, is sometimes hard to determine, right? That is why a very common practice in the industry, and this also happens in realistic art styles too, but you have a benchmark, right? So a benchmark can be an asset, it can be like a section of a level where they're literally trying to figure out like, okay, these elements are definitely going to come together in our game. How do we texture them? How do we model them? Like, how do we light them? Like, how do all those different elements come together? And if you then have like a benchmark scene that is kind of trying to tackle as many of those complex problems that you have in one, you kind of have a better idea already, right? But yeah, stylized, I've always found it like way more difficult because you get to now decide like, hey, I know that the proportions of this thing are this way, but what if I make them bigger? Or what if I make them smaller, you know? Or what if I turn them into like blockier shapes? Or there's so much choice. Cool. Next up is Umbrella. Umbrella actually did this like great little overpaint for their own environment. This is something that I can actually recommend everyone to do. You don't need to be a good 2D artist for this. You can literally just go to Google, grab a couple of images, place them in there. There's a bunch of really cool stuff that you can do with just like simple additions, right? But it gives you like a taste of what you're working towards. Sort of like a little mini benchmark, like I was just saying, you know? So yeah, that overpaint is great. That's really helpful. And I like where your environment is going, honestly. I like that we have this new shot as well. I'm not too sure about the tunnel, but I'll give you two options. Because those tunnels, they're usually built, I don't know if this is relevant to like American cities, probably not. But they're usually built for like an overground train or something like that, right? And then you have stuff going on underneath the arches. You'll see this very commonly in like London or like Berlin, or other places have this too, right? But that means that if you look down the alley, I would probably expect the right side of this alley to kind of just be like the metro, or like an overground tram or something like that, that is then supported by like multiple of these arches, you know? This is a very common sight, and maybe that's something that you can do. Or, I don't know. I think you can just remove the tunnel, and I don't think you're missing out on that much. But hey, I'll leave it up to you. Cool. But I think that was like a pretty short update from what I had to say, honestly. Let me see if you had any more questions. Yeah, no more questions, I think. General feedback. But yeah, I honestly like where this is going. I like that we're back at like this beautiful composition. I like that you're adding like these elements in. Really cool stuff. I like where this is going. So yeah. keep it up, I would say. Keep it up. Oh, there's this one little thing. I wanted to give you like another option because you have this like staircase going up here and here, which could work, but you can also use like a ladder or something like that. Maybe there's like a ladder here that takes you down. Maybe there's a ladder here. I don't know. I just wanted to give you like an additional option. Cool. Okay, I had this set like this for a reason. Owen, we are gonna be talking about your breakdown because you wanted to get some advice on how to do a breakdown, right? My first thought here, and I opened this deliberately. These are not repeating images, right? So these are all separate images, and this is a breakdown that Owen has made for like one of the cars that he's built for his environment, right? The reason why I wanted to open it like this is because I had this feeling of like, what am I looking at, right? If I compiled it all together. And this is not from a sense that like, this isn't great. I love what you're doing here. I really do, right? Like all the context, the in-depth breakdowns and like the time and effort that you're putting into it. Awesome. But if you just put the images in front of me, I have no idea what's going on, right? So think about like how people are going to digest this, and to the best of your abilities, try to erase all your memories of ever working on this project. Because let's say if we just have a look at like these images, I have no idea what the green stands for. I can sort of get what this is. No idea what the red stands for. No idea what the blue stands for, right? Yeah, so I would think really hard about like how you convey the information to people, right? And even for this, what I would recommend is maybe do a GIF, and then every GIF frame, you just build up the truck, right? Individual layers, and you can just use the images that you already have, open into like a GIF. That's going to be good, but it would be interesting to see, okay, base car, no layers, layer 1. So like layer 1 is this layer, layer 2 is this layer, layer 3 is this layer. And just you take me through like every layer, this is what I added on top of it, right? Because you have a lot of stuff going on this truck, and it's gonna need some explaining, right? And the second reason why I suggest using a GIF is because if you are gonna put this on your ArtStation like this, and they're all just like, you know, posts below each other, you are gonna have a lot of stuff that people have to sift through. And it's better, and this is only a truck, right? If we're not even talking about the rest of the environment. So it's about condensing the amount of information. If you want any more information on this, go check out any portfolio review. I talk about this stuff all the time. So yeah, it's about condensing the information and make sure that you can get people to understand what's happening in the most visually engaging way. That's always the way that I would approach this. Yeah, same here. I mean, it comes down to the same things, because if I just look at this stuff, also, I know that you're trying, and this always sucks, right? Because sometimes I will go through this, but it is just highly unlikely that someone is going to take their time to read 5 paragraphs of your material setup. And I know that sucks, because I know that you put in a lot of time and effort, but condense it down. Condense it down, single sentence for everything, and make sure that, make sure that it's like really nicely condensed. What I would recommend, if you want to do like a really thorough breakdown of this, I would honestly think about it more in the style of like an article, and really take people through all the steps, use the images for the breakdown, and turn it into like your own article. Publish it on your own ArtStation with a blog post, share that with people, right? Super helpful. Talk about your thought process, talk about like the individual setup. At that point, if you got people interested in an article, they're dedicated and they have more leniency on the amount of information that you're going to throw at them, right? Rather than a breakdown post. So yeah, if you are passionate about this stuff, I don't want to take that away from you, but like channel it into like an article or something like that, right? Another tip that I'll give, if you're writing an article anyway, might as well reach out to, I don't know, games artists or 80 level or whatever you fancy, you know? And maybe they'll love to have you on to do like an actual article for them. Cool. But yeah, like I said, it's not about the content is good, right? The content is great. It's about like how you now channel it to people and get it condensed enough so that people are actually going to meaningfully engage with it. Because yeah, stuff here is great, dude. I mean, yeah, that's also what your question was about, right? Like if it makes sense and if it's easy to understand. I will include a little description for each mask I use, which I haven't done yet, but I wanted to shots to do the most explaining. Yeah, I mean, without that description, I would have not known. Well, so here's the thing, like I could have guessed, but if you're asking me to do the work, then I'm out. Like, because someone else is just explaining it to me, right? It sounds crude, but like, that is what especially recruiters are like, right? Or like people under time pressure, they might make some quick assumptions as to what is going on, right? But assumptions, you can't rely on them. So yeah, I would say add those descriptions, but add them in GIFs. GIF or autoplay video format. Last thing that I'll say, optimize the car a little bit. You know, there's a lot of just like loops that are not really contributing to like the silhouette in any meaningful way. So yeah, you can optimize the car like drastically and make like a way better impression. Without even destroying anything. But yeah, like I said, Owen, awesome stuff. Now it's the hard part, right? Like trying to condense it, do a little bit of video editing, do a little bit of GIF making, all that kind of stuff. Make it look nice. We got a couple of questions in chat. Gabo is saying, do you think people will buy a shooter game? Wait, a shooter zombie rounds game like COD in... They actually... Are you talking about like, do people buy like zombie round shooters if it's not like attached to COD? I mean, probably. Like, the thing is, you can if the game has a really solid core loop and it's fun to play, people will play anything. You know, that's the beauty about like making games. So yeah. Perimora is saying, I'd never tried realism, but I would love to. A lot of times I get stuck on parts of my project because I don't know how to stylize something. That part is really hard. Yeah, that is basically coming up with your own art direction, right? It is basically trying to distill your creative vision into a rule set for yourself, but then potentially also for other people, right? It is so hard, even for like realistic games as well. Trying to build your own like art direction or like art bible, right? It is really difficult to do that. So definitely not an easy thing, and especially not for like beginners, right? That's why, especially for stylized, I would always recommend to go from a concept, because it is really hard to build a concept yourself. It really is. How to know when to press the publish button? When it's done. Easy, right? Here's the thing, like there's always going to be a part of you that is not going to be ready to press that publish button even if you press it. And that's going to be okay. I think in the beginning, there might actually be a large part of you that doesn't know when to publish something. But what is going to happen is the more things that you publish, the more of an understanding that you create with what you're actually about to publish, if that makes sense. Because what you're trying to do with publishing items is you're trying to create this habit of, I finish something, I put it online, I go to the next thing, I finish something, I put it online. And after a certain point, you're going to get better at realizing when you think a project is done. Because I can tell you like 1,000 things, right? Like when the modeling is finalized, when like the texturing is really well done, the texture needs to have this, and that, and blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't matter because you might be in a completely different stage of your artistic journey, which means that your personal situation is going to be different from anyone else. At a certain point, you have to, the best that I can say from like a very broad perspective is you have to make a judgment call, basically saying that I've either learned enough, I've either pushed myself hard enough and I'm done with the project, or I'm just ready for the next thing, right? And then you press that publish button and then you go on to the next thing. And then you do that value judgment again at the end of it, right? Yeah. But you're going to get better at it. And the work that you're going to be doing is going to get better. The thing is just repetition, right? Because I don't know what stage you are in, Selimhan. But it is normal to kind of feel like hesitation about like pressing the publish button. The first one is going to feel weird because it's the first one. You kind of have like this blank slate syndrome, right? Because, oh my God, like I've never done this, and it is daunting, but it's going to get better. You're going to get more comfortable with it. I wouldn't say that you ever get comfortable with it because the weird thing is in the beginning, you might not want to publish things because you're new at it and you don't know how that works and you're kind of just hesitant for like, oh my God, the first things, are people going to like it, blah, 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 all those things. After a certain point, that shifts because now you've built yourself up in a certain way with a certain quality bar in mind that now whenever you have the next thing that's going out, is it hitting that quality bar that you set for yourself? Is this gonna match expectations, whether it's from yourself or other people? So it's not like you're ever gonna be just like, God, this is done, I'm just gonna publish it, because it might hold like different value to you. But yeah, the habit of just publishing stuff is good habit. So keep it up, and if after a while you just, the first project that you have, the first project that I've ever published online was like on DeviantArt back in the day, and yeah, it's probably still around somewhere, but yeah, it's no longer what I would deem valuable to my skill set, right? But I needed to go through all that stuff to then get to the point where I'm at now. So yeah, best of luck, and just press the button whenever you're ready. Do it. One tip that I'll give, do it and walk away. Go for a long walk, close the PC, don't think about it. Don't sit there refreshing. Don't sit there like trying to see like who's gonna like it or something like that. Yeah, don't think about it. Just fire it off, turn off the PC, go for a walk. Or go do something else. Don't look at it. Hello. When will the course come? I need my portfolio, my dream job working at a Hazelight. Yeah, working on it. Working on it really hard. I think my weekend is going to be filled with it. The course is probably going to... I've been talking to like a couple of people that we are going to do some personal mentorships and the course with at the same time. So that's going to be pretty interesting. And then once we have that early access period over, which is probably going to be, I'm not going to put any dates to it anymore, because it keeps shifting around because I discover new things, but hopefully soon. The goal would still be like next month somewhere. That would still be the goal though. Fairmore is saying, plus in realism you can do generic art and it's okay. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. I think I'm trying to really think about it, right? Because I don't think you can, because there's so many more people doing the same thing, right? Because if I can compare, like, let's say, like the realistic texturing of, like, let's say a gun, or a realistic texturing of, I don't know, like a crane or whatever, right? I know that they use like the same material properties, right? And the same thing is going to apply to like both of them. So there's almost like somewhat equal footing between comparing a person who made a crane and the person who made like a weapon. Whereas like with stylized, you can just be like, hey, look, I don't want to do blending, but I'm going to work with flat colors and then really expressive like shapes, right? So how do I then compare that to someone who does like more traditional like stylized sculpting, right? Because those are like completely different categories almost, right? I mean, you could technically say the same about realism as well, but yeah. Like I've seen in games with wood sculpted in pretty much the same style. In Baldur's Gate, Kingdom Come Deliverance, The Witcher, the same is pretty similar. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. Can we see one stream where you make your environment? That would be legendary. I actually have like a catalog of like 42 videos of like me streaming live, like how I make environments. They're old, but they're still there. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Let's see. Samara is saying, every time that I'm pushing myself to think too much, I think this is my first time doing this. It won't be perfect. It calms me down a bit. Yeah, that is 100% right. The thing is, I've encountered and talked to and tried to help so many people and have helped people that have like this paralysis when it comes to putting their work out there. Or maybe not even putting the work out there, but just like this. This analysis paralysis of like, everything needs to be done to get on the portfolio because I need to get that job, right? And I keep saying this on stream. I think, oh my god, I think 80% of the projects that I've ever done have like failed, are not good enough, or was just to like train something, you know? Like, it's not everything needs to have like necessarily like the destination of being on your portfolio. Because I think that pressure and that weight stops a lot of people from just executing and just making stuff and publishing things. Abhishek is saying, I saw your old stream. It was quite helpful for my project. I am happy, even though that shit is like really old. I would actually... See, here's the thing though, like with streaming, I love talking. I mean, you're seeing it right now. We should be doing more feedback and we will do that in a second. But like, I just love talking about this stuff. And I love engaging with all of you. And that was the issue when I was trying to build an environment, right? Because the environment requires me to be like focused and like really heads down, but then I love talking so much. There was like a conflict there. But yeah. I would still love to stream like a smaller environment at some point. I don't know if I ever will. Because there's also to me there's always something so personal, you know. There's always something so personal about like making art that is just like, I'm in my little happy space, you know? And it's like my little bubble. And yeah. So many video games coming. If I become a billionaire, I will buy some studios. Nice. Let me know. And I'll build a studio, you know, so that I can be bought by you. And then you can give me like, I don't know, give me like 100 million. You know, I'll be happy. Oh my god. Devil is saying, hey, how are you? Good, good, thank you. Thank you for asking. How are you? I think that was my original thought with my environment. It was something that I wanted to iterate on and not necessarily publish. Now I'm a bit unsure though. Maybe I should publish it instead. Well, no, I think what you should be doing is you should only, in my opinion, this is going to be weird, right? There's two different kinds of projects here. I think there's a project that you do just because you want to have fun with it. And then if it turns out to be a portfolio project, then that's good. That's an additional benefit, right? But it doesn't have to be. Then there's also the other projects where you're like, hey, I want to get a job. This is my timeline. That means that I need to do this project in order to get closer to my end goal of getting a job, right? And I think what sometimes you're lucky that those two things coincide. Sometimes. But they don't always. And I think that's what a lot of people focus too much of their time on, is they're trying to get that overlap between the two. But sometimes it just doesn't work like that, you know? So you don't want to share your art with us? It's honestly fair. It's been, I don't even how long since I've done any personal work. I am so excited to be able to carve out a little bit of my time starting next month to carve out personal work time. Oh my god. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm so excited for it. I still have the priorities with Beyond Extent, right? But oh my god. I'm so ready. I'm ready. I feel like I haven't done like any solid art in a while. So I'm ready. And maybe I'll share it, you know? You know what? Maybe we can just hang out in the Discord and then I'll stream it there. And then, you know, I don't have to record. I don't have to entertain people. I can just do work and just watch me work. Like, yeah, maybe something like that sounds better. We'll see. Black Myth Wukong environment. I played the game, but this type of environment, what software is used? That's a good question. I don't know if they use Quixel. I've not played the game myself, honestly. Still struggling with Unreal Engine. Found a cause for the crashes with my control rig, but it's going through the landscape and no one in any Discord server knows the fix for this. Spent like 3 hours fixing it. Well, yeah, well, welcome to game dev, you know? I wish that there was something else that I could say. I wish that I could help you personally, but dealing with like a stupid issue where you spend like 3 hours trying to fix it, welcome to game dev. The only thing that I can think about there is collision setup, potentially. If you are just going through the landscape, that just means that it's probably to do with your collisions. Hey Rio, caught alive, let's go. I added collisions and it didn't help. Did you add the correct collisions though? Do you have them set up in the correct way? And if yes, then I don't know. Question for Tim, do you have any advice to buy a new screen to make 3D art? God, it's a good question. I would honestly say just get a cheap screen. I've worked with like cheap screens for a while. For the stuff that we do, you don't need to have like a color calibrated like screen or anything fancy. If I can give a recommendation, the ones that I'm using now are two 2K. So I used two 2K BenQ designer monitors. They were actually really cheap. They were 2K, 60 Hz, and they had a pretty good color range. And they come with some like additional fancy settings that I barely use, but yeah. 4K versus 2K? 2K for me. I actually, before this, I used 4K screens. And just with anything performance heavy that you want to do, if you want to run like 2 4K screens and you're doing Unreal Engine and like all that kind of stuff, it's just too performance heavy. Plus also, I don't really care about like the extra pixels. I really don't. There was a moment where I switched from like 4K back to 2K and it was like awkward, but after a week it was gone. I honestly don't really mind 4K or 2K. I'm completely fine with 2K. But yeah, that's what I prefer. Because I mean, you could look at fancy stuff. You could look at like the type of panels that's in it, and spend more on like the type of panel and all that kind of stuff. Most of the time, you don't need that stuff. You know, I've been using these screens for like 6 years, I think, something like that, and they served me well, and they're still going. Like, I'm really happy with BenQ. So, if that's my recommendation, that's my recommendation. Let's continue on with some feedback. Course price, how much? Not sure yet. Not sure yet. We will have to see about that one. Cool, Abhishek. We've been looking at your work for like a while now, but you just wanted some asset feedback, right? I'm gonna give you like a couple of high-level things. Silhouette. Focus a lot of your time on silhouette. You're doing some good stuff with the barrels. But for example, the stalls can use a lot of work, and the carts can use a lot of work. Just because silhouette is the most important thing, so wherever you have like boxy shapes, break up those boxy shapes, you know? Wherever you can break those up, do it. And then the second thing is kill anything that's straight. So it's kind of in the same line, right? But whenever you're building a stall like this, have it made out of like, I don't know, crooked timbers or something like that. Have like a timber that's kind of like supporting it this way. Especially if you want to sell the idea that like people have handcrafted this, right? So that you have like a little bit more of an interesting silhouette going on. But yeah. Also, a recommendation here is look into how they build market stalls, because this looks like a permanent market stall. But some market stalls are actually built for you to just be like, okay, I'm done with it, back it all up, and we're good to go again, right? Because markets were not like a permanent thing in most cases. But yeah, focus on the silhouette, kill anything that is straight. That is going to be really helpful. And yeah, what I can also say is, oh my god, I'm gonna go on like a rope rant again, but add details. And what I mean by details, especially ropes, oh my god, I love them so much because they're so versatile, you know? But you can literally have like a rope that is just like a little detail just hanging from the sides. And even this, you can already tell that just like adds a little bit to the silhouette, you know? Oh, love it so much. Those ropes are so good. I love using ropes because as soon as you have a rope, you have one here, you can use it anywhere. Oh my god, they're so flexible. So usable in multiple situations. Because even if you're like, hey, this box kind of looks like kind of dumb. Okay, now, cool. How would they do that? You already have ropes on it? What is that? No. But you can literally just be like, okay, we're just gonna have some rope here. And then what they usually do is like, they do like this weird knot situation up top, you know? Right. And now you have like a way more interesting looking box because you added ropes to it. And then with a rope, you can kind of build like one of these piles of ropes. You can have it like, I don't know, stacked up in here. You can have it draping over. You can do so much cool stuff with it. Anyway, enough about ropes. But ropes, a common thing is also hay, right? So like hay is also pretty versatile in the same way, where you can have it at the bottom of barrels or something like that. I'm using a trim sheet for the stall and the wagon. Will be added RGBA mask on top of it. Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, like textual detail would also be a thing, but I would honestly... This is almost a sequence in what I would do, right? So from like most important to like least important, I would say. Well, maybe switch these two around. Maybe. Yeah. Good stuff, Abhishek. Thank you for sharing your work. Looking forward to seeing them in the scene. Oh, sorry, one last thing. When you're doing these statues, it could be cool to exaggerate the features also in terms of like the silhouette, right? You can see that the silhouette that I have with like the eyebrows moving up a bit, with the hair being more voluminous, whatever the word is. That can really add to the perception of it just being like a really nice statue, right? You don't want your statue to feel like a blob. It needs to be kind of defined a bit better. And also it kind of feels low res. I don't know if that is coming from the bake or the texturing or whatever, but it kind of feels like you want a little bit more detail on the top statue. Cool. Couple quick things there. But yeah, great stuff, Abhishek. Keep it up, buddy. And the rules that I'm laying out, kill anything that's straight, focus on the silhouette, can be applied to literally everything, right? Buildings, the assets, like whatever you're building, try to make the most of it. Cool, cool, cool. Next person up, Lenny. The project has been going on for a while and I'd like to finish it soon. I'm open to general feedback, but mainly I'd like to know if there's anything that sticks out in terms of quality. I think you've done a fantastic job, Lenny. This is honestly beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. The only thing, and this is going to be nitpicky, right? Whenever you do this type of foliage, the main question that I think about is where's the soil? Where is it growing out of, right? Usually you want to have some kind of connection somewhere. So like if let's say this is hanging down here and it then kind of creates a connection here, that would make sense. Maybe this section is kind of growing up a little bit, right? It's coming from there. That could also make sense. But try to connect it as much as you can with like pieces of like soil or, yeah, basically spaces where stuff can grow, right? A couple of nitpicks. If you have this beautiful foliage here, don't have some of it drape over. That always looks so good. And then, yeah, try to thin it out as well. Yeah. This is the small stuff, right? I think you can do a lot with the beautiful foliage that you've created already. Just have the ivy just draping over a little bit. Because now it kind of feels like it's manicured, right? It's almost like in the little strip, kind of breaking that up. Again, focusing on silhouette and stuff, right? Can really be helpful here. Rosani is saying beautiful work. Yes. And we will get to your question, Rio, in just a second. Thank you for asking. Yeah. But if you're looking to finish the project, those are like the main things that stood out to me immediately. I know we're far into the distance, but having this like kind of like reach over the ledge, you know, always helpful. Especially with ivy. Yeah, you can just have it like cling to stuff, like pretty easy. Yeah, beautiful. Lovely, lovely stuff. I love the way that you break up the silhouette in like very, very tiny details here. And also the way that like this cactus like twists a little bit. Really cool stuff, you know. And this stuff is relatively easy to do, right? But you can see how much this adds. You can almost make like a straight looking cactus. And one of my favorite things to do when it comes to foliage to make it look more unique And I'm not trying to steal your thunder here, Lenny, at all. But like when you have like a cactus, you just make it like straight first. And then what you just do is you just select like the top vertice. You set your soft selection to be like really soft. You just take the top vertice and you just spin a little bit. That adds so much. It adds so much, and it creates like this nice natural kind of flow where it kind of looks like it organically grew out of it. Beautiful. This stuff does wonders for your scene, right? You can apply that to anything, right? So going back to Abhishek's work that we just talked about, those stalls, I would honestly, for the most part, do the same kind of trick. Take the top of a pillar, rotate the pillar slightly, and now you have like a more organic, like hand-carved pillar, just by doing like soft selection shenanigans. Yeah. Really, really good stuff. Yeah. Honestly, I'm really happy with this. And I think you should be too. I mean, you should be too, and then I should be happy that we get to look at this beautiful work. That's the way that we should frame this. But I would be happy to like publish this, honestly. So, great stuff, Lenny. Great stuff. Something here as well. Cool, cool, cool. 4 more. Samara, are you still here? Why haven't you raised your hand? Sorry, did I forget to mention it? Normally, I think you might be a new community member. I think. No, I've seen your name before. Yeah, but feel free to raise your hand if you're in the queue, just waiting, right? So that you can kind of skip the queue. A little hack for the stream. But yeah, let's have a look, Samara. Wait, oh, you're running into issue with SpeedTree as well? Yeah, SpeedTree, I've heard that it's better now, but anyway. Let's see. My question for the Whip Wednesday would be, is it better to follow the concept background with the huge trees, or would it be more interesting in terms of portfolio exploring another option like smaller trees and maybe mountains in the back? Because I'm afraid that I won't be able to make the lighting from the concept too. I think I cannot use it at all. Interesting. I think, God, I haven't done this myself, but I think you can message us support, and for a lot of people, they got like a 6-month free subscription because they had a lot of issues with being hacked and all that kind of stuff before. But I'm assuming you tried that, so yeah. Sorry to hear that. Cool. Your questions for Whip Wednesday is huge trees in the background or small trees in the background. So the interesting thing is, if you do big trees, you have to do less of them because they fill up more volume, right? And they also look nicer because you just have this like kind of magical feel going on with big trees. So yeah, big or small trees, right? That's the question, really. Or like, do I follow the concept or do my own thing? Basically, it comes down to what you want to do when it comes to following the concept, right? There's nothing wrong with just deviating from the concept, do your own spin. I would still love to see like big trees just because there's something really awesome about seeing these big trees. The other thing that I would say is for the big ones, you don't even need SpeedTree necessarily. Because what you will be relying on with bigger trees is just you want to do like a nice sculpt of like a trunk, right? Because that's the only thing that you're going to see. And you honestly don't even need to be bothered with like the canopies because you're not even going to be seeing it, right? So that just means that as soon as you have, let's say, let's say these canopies, right? You can literally just make like a couple of these branches and then just stick them onto like the main tree, because most of it is going to be invisible anyway. Which is going to save you a lot of time. You don't have to have speed tree or anything else specifically, right? So yeah, you can do the big trees with no speed tree. For the small trees, you would probably need speed tree to save yourself like a lot of time, right? I would make the trees and the bushes with canopies are the hard stuff. That's why I haven't done them yet. Yeah, but in your case, Conceptual, your canopy is visible, right? So you have to be really careful with like where the trunk and like the branches and all that kind of stuff splits off. That's where you need something like Speed Tree to help you with that stuff, honestly. Yeah. I've never done anything like that before, so that's why I would use Speed Tree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I would say if you have access to Speed Tree, that's good. I mean, to be fair, you could do the smaller trees as well in Speed Tree, in ZBrush. It's going to take you a little bit more time, but they're going to look more unique potentially, right? Well, to be fair, like these are just like pretty straightforward trees to sculpt, to be honest. Like what you could do. These guys you can sculpt, right? So you can literally just make this one sculpt and then do like manual scattering when it comes to like the canopies and all that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to these guys, these are going to be like relatively simple, right? You don't even need a sculpt. This can literally just be like the trunk with a title on it. And then you just have to figure out like how you're going to do like all the branches and stuff. But you can do that manually. Yeah. It honestly just comes down to you sitting down, trying a bunch of stuff, and seeing what works for you, right? Within your given skill set. I assume that if you've done stuff like this before, you already know how to sculpt. So honestly, you don't need Speed Tree. You can probably just sculpt those trees and kind of make it work that way. It's going to be more of a unique approach, but a lot of people have done that before you. And they look quite nice, actually. Like if you sculpt them like uniquely. Yeah. I would honestly say just give it a try, right? See what you can do. Don't think about the final result. Give it a couple of tries. See what works best. Try sculpting it a little bit. Don't do a detailed sculpt. Just try to get the shapes right. Does this work? Potentially. And then go back to using a tileable on that mesh or something like that, you know. I know that I'm very vague, so let me give you like a couple of options, right? So, option 1, Speed Tree. You don't have access to that at the moment, but maybe we can do that, right? So, option number 2 would be... Option number 2 would be full sculpt. Why not Kina? Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate that. Welcome to the community as well. So option number 2 would be full sculpt in ZBrush or whatever. And then you just have to manually place like the canopy stuff, right? Speed Tree for the background ones and ZBrush for the main bigger ones. You can do that as well, yeah. But like that assumes that you have access to Speed Tree, right? Which you don't. So, I mean, here's the thing. You can, yeah, I mean, that's not a bad approach. Okay, I'll give you another option. So, option 2 is full sculpts, right? Option 3 is hybrid, which means trunk is sculpted. And then you use that trunk sculpt to then scatter your branches on top of it. In SpeedTree. So what you could do is, let's say this is like a really unique tree, right? And you sculpt this all the way. You can actually have like a sculpt that goes up until this point. And then from this point, you then transition into a mesh, right? That is just going to use a tileable. And then you can just use both of those meshes to kind of just like add like a bunch of branches on in SpeedTree. So SpeedTree, that would be the hybrid approach. Because again, like the only thing that we care about is like really nice detail when it comes to the bottom of the trunk, right? And then you can use a procedural system to kind of scatter it on top of it. I'll give you another tip here. You can do the branches in SpeedTree. You can also use particle systems. Or geonodes in Blender. This is how I used to do it before. This is how I'm doing stuff now. So whenever I need to scatter something or whenever I need to create foliage, I use geonodes now. But before that, I was just using a particle system. And with a particle system, what is cool is I can basically just say like, hey, scatter these meshes. And it's just going to draw like particles. You set your particle system to hair. So it's basically like, imagine that you're telling a particle system to scatter hair on top of a mesh. But instead of hair, you're actually scattering just meshes. And what you can then do is you can replace those meshes by like branches that you want, right? So yeah, that would be a way as well. Pretty hacky, pretty technically involved as well compared to SpeedTree, right? SpeedTree is just like a toolkit that you can use out of the box, where something like this, you'll need to invest more time into it. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful somewhere. A very common technique for the trunk is to sculpt only the first couple of meters and then use the tileable for the rest. Yep. Skeletal Bones is asking, is it worth only using Unreal Engine for the environment art portfolio pieces? Nope. You need to be able to showcase that you can also make assets as well. Whereas environment art, whereas Unreal Engine is just a tool to compose things there. Oh, is it only worth using Unreal Engine? Oh, I mean versus Unity. No, you can use whatever engine you want. As long as it's real time, for sure. That's where your question comes in, Conceptual. No offline rendering, no V-Ray, no Corona, anything like that. Because the whole point is that you work within a game-related engine or like a real-time engine, because then you have to keep performance in mind. But you can use Godot, you can use Unreal, you can use Unity. The reason why, I mean, this is going to be no surprise. The reason why Unreal is the main one is because most accessible, most UI friendly for artists, and also widely used in the majority of the games industry now. The only cohort that's still holding on to Unity from like a recent GDC report is indie studios that were already established. New game studios that are coming up actually use Unreal way more than Unity, which is interesting. Kafran, I think you just posted your work as a whip on your portfolio, right? You kind of know my feelings on that. Like whenever I see a whip on someone's portfolio, I usually don't like it. Because here's the thing, like a portfolio is always just made for a finished project, right? But yeah. So you're saying, while it's a big step up from my last environment, I just have this feeling that it's not the quality of a junior yet. I can't exactly pinpoint the reason though. Any advice I can get to push the scene to a strong junior level would be greatly appreciated. Kafran, I'm gonna skip this one. I might reply to you in text, but this feels more like a portfolio review question rather than a work in progress question. But I'll get back to your entry in the community. Rio Mendes is saying, after the Unity drama, yeah, I mean, Unity definitely smashed their own windows with it as well. That reminds me of your earlier question, Rio. How do you go about creating assets, destroying everything like a helicopter to a wooden house got burned? These days, Houdini. That's how a lot of destruction gets made, by just simulating destruction. That's probably, if you want to create like really in-depth destruction, is probably going to be Houdini. But you can do the same thing with using like simple fracture nodes. You can boolean stuff out. You can use geo nodes like in Blender. There's so many options. But if you're talking about professional level, it's probably going to be Houdini. Do you think it's a good idea or bad idea to make scenes with specific constraints in a scene optimized for VR? Let me read that again. So you think it's a good or a bad idea to make scenes with specific constraints? For example, scene optimized for VR. I wouldn't target VR, but I think targeting... I mean, somewhat targeting like current day standards is good. Yeah, I think that's good. People had conversations about smart materials and substance. What do you think about using it? Do we need to make smart materials? Do we need to make materials from scratch? Same thing with brushes and ZBrush and Blender. It's not really the same thing. I think if you start over-relying on them, like a lot, you get to see it. Smart materials and substance, really recognizable. Especially if you're a professional prop artist, you can immediately tell if someone uses smart material, and that's like, yeah, what's the point, right? Because here's the thing. If you present that on your portfolio, and even if you don't mention it, but I can tell that it's a smart material, now I immediately disregard anything texturing that you've done, right? Because you are literally just using a drag and drop solution. So I know that if I want to test how you can texture, I need to, I don't know, send you an art test for that or something like that, right? That's why the recommendation is always to make like things from scratch. It is okay if you're doing your first asset and you want to use a smart material to kind of get to the grips of how that system works and all that kind of stuff, right? But if you're taking things serious and let's say you're making props to like a high degree, you need to make those materials from scratch. With brushes, it is slightly different because you are still doing a lot of transformative work on top of it, right? If you were to compare like, let's say an alpha, where you're doing like textural painting and you're using alpha, that is completely fine because you still have to make sure that the material and all that kind of stuff reads really well, right? Same thing with brushes in ZBrush or Blender. You can slap a bunch of brushes on it and I can immediately tell that that's just like a bunch of brushes that you slapped on it. So you still need to put in the time and effort to make it look good. But if you can use them in a proper way, then do like a little bit of like sculpting on top of it to nicely integrate them within your asset, totally fine. Right, 2 more for today. We've got Maddie. Let me scroll down. I'm worried the material still feels the way. Still feels that way, but I've added a lot more roughness now, and the light catches parts of the drawers and the sides of the desk. Also added gradient of color, blah blah blah. As for the baking areas previously, that wasn't because I didn't export. That was because I didn't export correctly with smoothing groups turned on. Yeah, but that's good that it was a simple fix. So now we should be able to see everything quite nicely. That is looking way better. Nice one. Cool. Lighting is a bit different now. Light points are put in place to make more sense to the scene, and added a color lookup table to make everything feel more warm, especially the desk. Cool. I think it is a bit too contrasty for my taste. That's what I would say. So especially the darks are too dark. They're way much too towards the black, right? So that's one thing that I would sort of slightly increase. I know that you're going for like a more moody piece. I think that's cool, but yeah, slightly increasing that is going to help. Adding a little warble in the paper here could be good. And that can be added to like anything, right? Like whenever you have something like this is like either really strong paper, but I think we just need to warp it just a little bit, you know? Just like a little bend here. Like on all the pieces of paper. Sort of this stuff, right? Feels very natural. Pretty good. I like it. Also, what I would say is on this scene specifically, watch your depth of field, because the letter itself is blurry, right? So put in your depth of field plane, like your debug plane, and see where the focus shifts, right? Like that purple plane that you can drag. Use that. That's really helpful. That's in your post-processing settings. Yeah. Really, really good update. I like what I'm seeing. Yeah, good stuff, Maddie. Yeah, about the material, that the flatness. I don't know. I think that comes down. Have you tried like upping the resolution of your textures? To see if that makes like a huge difference. That would be the first thing that I would try. And then maybe next time, if you really want to talk about textures, send me texture breakdowns, right? So that we can look at the individual maps. So if you want more help next time, let me know. But yeah, good stuff on the updates, Maddie. It is definitely an improvement from last time. I love that you fixed all the baking errors. That's awesome. Keep up the great work, dude. Can you value pick directly in Unreal? I'm not sure what that was in reference to. For certain things you can. Just depends on what, right? Does it matter if you make a scene with baked or versus real-time lighting? Do people reviewing portfolios care either way? I think most of the stuff you're going to be seeing is going to be real-time because it's just easier. I think if you want to showcase that you can also do baked lighting to increase your chances of getting a job, that could be nice. But honestly, if you're aiming for AAA games, if you can just do real-time lighting, you just make shit look nice. In a lot of cases, the lighting is going to be taken care of for you, right? Because in AAA, if we work with real-time lighting, we don't have to make light maps. If we work with baked lighting, then we just have to make like light map UVs. The difference there is really small for us. The difference for lighting artists is actually huge, right? Because their whole workflow changes. So if you are a lighting artist and you want to increase your chance of getting into the industry, showcasing baked lighting is actually really good. But for an environment artist, not necessarily. I've been thinking that Houdini is the way, but I hear so little about Houdini in the community. Also, Houdini resources are so heavy for VFX and film, it's hard to find pure modeling stuff. Actually, if you go to the Houdini website, a friend of mine, she participates in a lot of the projects that are made for game dev. They have like a bunch of really good resources. You can download all the projects, and they have like a bunch of video content surrounding that too. I think the last project she was working on was worked on was Project Grot, which was like this lava in lava cave or something like that. Those things are like great resources to learn from. And then before that, she did Project Titan as well, which was like also game dev oriented by building like really cool tools in Houdini. In Photoshop, you use the eyedropper tool to check the value range. Is there something like that in Unreal? You spoke about darks to dark. Oh, okay, yeah. That's a good question, actually. I don't know if they have like a histogram or like a levels thing. I have not tried that before, actually. But I don't know. There must be. There must be somewhere. When it comes to breakdowns or textures on ArtStation, what would you want to see usually? I'm gonna be lame, and I'm gonna refer you to like all the streams that I've done on like portfolio reviews. I talk about that stuff all the time. It's like a recurring question, so go check those out. Because yeah, I do want to get to this last one, and then I need to head on out. Because it was unsurprisingly a longer session than I expected. As they always tend to be. So let's go into the last one for today from Jonas. I've not seen your work here before, I think. So pretty new in the community, but would like to share what I'm working on. Awesome. Love to see you, Jonas. First time at Whip Wednesday, I would love to get some feedback regarding the quality of my floor. Nice. Of the floor. Is that the latest one? Yeah. I think the floor is pretty good. Team's advice is unparalleled. Thank you. I appreciate it. You're too kind. I try my best. Even though I'm fucking boiling in here. Oh my god. I can't wait to grab a cold shower after this. My advice for the floor here. You want to exaggerate some stuff, right? I think your base values are pretty good. It kind of feels like really nice concrete, right? Especially the area that I circulated kind of has like some nice variation going on. What could be nice is to enhance sort of that realism a little bit is find opportunities for roughness contrast. So what I mean by that is maybe there's like a leak, wet puddle, I don't know, spilled drink, anything like that. Add that somewhere here so that we can add like a variation, right? Because, I mean, you have something here. I don't think that reads correctly yet. So I would look into enhancing what that looks like, right? Because what you're trying to do, I really like. You're trying to get some sort of like reflective properties going in an otherwise like pretty dull environment. I think what I'm seeing here is that the color value is too gray for what I would expect to be just water. Right, so yeah, I noticed that as I was writing it down, but that's good that you're already trying to do it. But yeah, try to make it look like an actual puddle. And then maybe what you can do is you can play with like some sort of storytelling bits, you know, like people walking around, wet footsteps, and all that kind of stuff. And also, because I do like some of these splotches, right? Like decals for like additional breakup. I guess you can use Windows Power Tools for checking the values. Yeah, there is a hotkey where you can turn your screen to black and white. That could be helpful for people as well. Yeah, Jonas. I hope that's all right in terms of feedback. I think you're on the good track. I like it overall. It just comes down to picking a couple of areas where you do like additional blending between surfaces with some decals here and there, right? And I think you're gonna be on a very good track then. Hey, Jonas. The hotkey on my computer is Control plus Windows key plus C. I think you have to enable that at first. I don't think it's enabled by default. I might be wrong though. I made a sticky note. That's genius. Let's actually have a look. So what was it? Control Windows C? Yeah, I think you have to enable it. It doesn't work. But thank you for mentioning that though. That is awesome. All right, let me switch back. Let me already save all the feedback out for the week. Last question from Skeleton Bones. We'll get into that in just a sec. I misspelled feedback. Feedback. Cool. Let me chuck all these in. All right. Last question. For Environment Art Portfolio, is it worth providing a breakdown of technical stuff? I wrote all the shaders myself or implemented things from papers, or is that more technical art? Well, I mean, if you've done that, it doesn't hurt showcasing it, right? But that is not for an environment art portfolio. That doesn't need to be done. As an environment artist, you are most likely not going to be in touch with like any shaders at all. Well, most likely, right? Again, my experience comes from AAA. I have never had to touch a shader in professional work. I've had to touch materials, but I've never had to touch like the master material or like the shader underneath it, you know? So if you go more down the route of, you know, building shaders from scratch, and I'm talking about like using high-level shader language or anything like that more specific, right? Then you're talking about like technical art. I'm not talking about like making a material inside of Unreal Engine, because a lot of people can do that, unless you're doing like very unique stuff, you know, like that would be interesting to break down. But yeah, I think for your portfolio, yeah, showcase the effect of it, right? Rather than, oh, here's an image, here's what I made. Showcase the effect and showcase how versatile it is. Again, I would redirect you to some of my portfolio reviews. I talk about that stuff all the time. I think we at least encounter one person every stream with some sort of like material breakdown stuff. So yeah, but appreciate the questions though, Skeleton Bones. Appreciate the questions. All right, people, I'm gonna make this short. Well, it says that after 3 hours of streaming, but I'm boiling, so I'm gonna take my leave. Take a shower, do some more work on the website. But it was lovely hanging out with all of you. I appreciate your time that you spend with me. And then we'll see each other on Friday for portfolio reviews. So yeah, see you on Friday at, oh my God, I don't know what time that is, UTC. Midday my time. So basically the time that we started to stream minus 8, I think. Okay. That is going to lead nowhere, but hey. Have a good night, everyone, and we'll see each other on Friday. Bye-bye.